rapid fire round. The first question is, at what age do you want to retire?
55.
How long does it take for you to get ready in the mornings?
Hour and a half.
Favorite color?
Blue.
What time of day are you most inspired?
10 p.m.
How many hours of sleep can you survive on?
5.
The city in which the best kiss of your life happened.
San Francisco.
Pick one, Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk.
Ooh. Neither.
How do you relax?
Friends, family, good food, good wine.
How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
4 to 6. Look.
A habit of yours that you hate.
Procrastination.
The most valuable skill you've learned in life.
Negotiation.
Your favorite Netflix show.
Top Boy.
Morning routine, are you an early riser or a night owl?
Night owl.
Sure. One word description of your leadership style.
Easygoing.
Coffee or tea to kickstart your day.
Coffee.
Top priority in your daily schedule.
Getting through meetings and getting to actual work.
Ideal vacation spot for relaxation.
South of France.
Key factor for maintaining a work-life balance.
I think just keeping everything in perspective.
Alright, so now we can move on to the longer questions, which you can answer with as much time and ease as you like. Sure. The first one is, you've been in the game for 20 plus years. What was the moment that took you from being a hands-on systems engineer to running massive network infrastructure at Uber?
Sure. So I think the moment happened probably in 2015, 2016. So I'd been at Uber for some time, and we had scaled up our infrastructure, basically starting from zero in 2014. And what we realized, and I remember, very clearly, my boss at the time coming to me and a couple of my colleagues and saying, you guys are not thinking big enough. You're not building it big enough. He's like, this can be bigger than anything you imagine. And, we thought he's sort of panicking, exaggerating, but he was absolutely right. So I've taken that to heart at my career at Uber. We've spent the last 10 years making sure that we're always building it bigger than we ever think we'll need, because we are going to need it. This company has sort of outgrown every expectation I had in terms of scale, size, and network and infrastructure. And it's been a great journey, learning that curve and riding that wave to where we are today.
So if you had to go back, what advice would you give the young you just starting out?
Yeah, I think I think it'd be slow down a little bit, which sounds counterintuitive, but you were growing so fast that we were so heads down on trying to build and make sure we could keep up with the company growth. I think if we had slowed down a little bit at that point, could have built perhaps more enduring architecture that would have lasted us longer than having to go back and redo things iteratively over and over to make sure we're building the right architecture for we were at the one time. I also would have tried to spend more time with my other fellow engineers and other teams, really dig into and learn about other aspects of the Uber infrastructure stack in more depth than I did at that time.
You've seen both Fortune 500 giants and scrappy startups. What's the biggest difference in how they treat infrastructure?
Well, sure. So I think small scrappy startups, a lot of it is the intentional or unintentional trade-offs that you're forced to make, either for speed and velocity or for cost or for other reasons. And I think the trick is you have to think in terms of, how can I do this in a scrappier way but still maintain that quality? And I think when you're in a larger enterprise, one of the challenges is when you have every resource available to you, you don't have that same sort of ingenuity necessarily that goes into it. So you really have to train yourself to put that ingenuity into what you're doing, so you're not getting stale in terms of your design, your architecture, your implementation, your operations, because it's very easy to cover up that sort of staleness with the ease that you're able to build things. And you're not necessarily building the most efficient architecture or high-performing architecture that could, because it's easy to not. So.
And how do you mix these two worlds in how you lead at Uber?
Yeah, so it is a challenge. So as we've grown bigger and bigger, we're a big company. We have 4,000 engineers today. But our principles and sort of our attitude is like when I joined and we had 16 engineers at platform engineering or infrastructure, which is that, we want to understand the business, we want to meet the needs in the business, and we want to deliver as quickly as possible while maintaining a high quality part. Those things are in tension sometimes, but I think, having that attitude of like, we're going to be opportunistic, we're going to enable the business to be opportunistic, and we're going to keep sort of hustling to build ingenious solutions at the right time that can be in for the business is what we're focused on. Now, as you get bigger, there's obviously multiple teams involved, there's multiple leaders involved, so that negotiation becomes key, the ability to influence others, understand stakeholders, not just what they're asking you, but why they're asking you, what their constraints are, what are they up against, and how they alleviate some of those for them, so you guys can go to successful into the apps.
So for someone who's not an engineer, what's the hardest part of building systems on Uber scale?
Yeah, so one of the things that you're never really prepared for, unless maybe you worked at, there are companies much bigger than us, hyperscalers, cloud providers, but you start to realize that as let's say you go from 10 to 100 in anything, or 100 to 1,000 or 10,000 or more, things break, right? People break, processes break, systems break, software breaks, and it breaks in new and novel ways sometimes. So I think when you have a combination of all of these things breaking, it's both where some of the biggest learnings you'll ever have come from, but it's also the biggest challenges you ever had. So I think really focusing on how to build sustainable building blocks, whether it is in people, processes, or things that can then be extended out into systems, is really important. So, in the early days, like many companies, we had a high degree of craftsmanship. As what I mean by that is we had some brilliant engineers who were generalists and could build almost anything, and they built special systems that made Uber one. Now, when you try to take that and 10x it or 100x it or 1000x it, you can't 10x that engineer. And so how do you build those things and take the same level of care, but build it into systems rather than individual things, a system that works at scale? And so it's difficult. It changes with everything you're doing. But I think having that mindset of when you're building something, having that mental checklist of, okay, if I had to take this thing and multiply it by 1,000, where would it break? And can I address these things now? It doesn't make sense to address this now.
So are there safeguards for failure at Uber that promote creativity without punishing it?
Yeah, I think it goes back to sort of our engineering culture. So our culture is, we have a high degree of trust in our engineers. So we have a set of engineering principles that we all are not just, it's not just a poster on the wall or anything. It's something that we truly believe in, or we're bought into. And so if you have that, that everyone's operating from these same sort of engineering principles, you can kind of let go, right? Let them be creative. Let them, you have that trust that they're going to do the right thing for the company. And then on the flip side, not everything goes right. You make mistakes, things happen. We have a blameless post-mortem culture. We're going through and we try to identify, but not who did this, but how was this, so we have preventative feature. We also, we're pushing the edge in different technology areas where we allow people to really push the envelope in terms of like, this is what will push it as far as you need to for Uber. And then, things like embracing the open source community, really understanding how people bigger than us are doing this, or the Benos, the Dungles of the world, having that good engineer to engineer exchange with engineers for those companies, and really understanding what is the state of the art, where it can, and then taking what we want from there that can fit for leader, and really giving engineers the space to both, be creative, make mistakes, and keep pushing the mission forward. It works. It's not perfect, but it works.
So to add to all that, there's now the perfect storm of edge computing, 5G, AI. Where do you think global networks are headed in the next 5-10 years?
Sure. So I think it's a really interesting question. So I think what you're seeing is, this sort of bifurcation of infrastructure in general, but networks also, in that you're getting these larger and larger data center footprints that will when we were building 5 megawatt data center footprints, we thought that was large, and it was large at the time, and still is a bit. But then you hear and you see these AI factories being built at the gigawatt scale, 100 gigawatts, etc., and you realize scale of the infrastructure scale of the network is getting concentrated into much, much larger deployments. I think the challenge is, at the same time you're having this concentration of infrastructure for AI, you're also seeing this sort of disaggregation of network and infrastructure for every other use case. So an example for Uber is the autonomous vehicles. We've partnered with a few different autonomous vehicle companies, and really the edge computing is moving from any sort of data center into a car, right? The car has GPU, car has local compute, the car is processing tons and tons of telemetry data, radar, LiDAR, mapping, video in real time, and as that data has to get off that car into a cloud, into a data center for processing and so on. Companies can improve their models and so on. So you're seeing this need for high bandwidth connectivity at the very edge, really cars or electric vertical takeoff aircraft or drones or delivery robots, you name it. And so you need ultra low latency bandwidth to those devices. And then you're seeing massive bandwidth needs for the back end is that, right? Which is the AI data centers, AI factors. And so, the telecom industry, 5G and with other technologies, really has to push, because at this point, even in the AI and infrastructure, the network right now is the bottleneck. And so, having a super high bandwidth connectivity between GPUs or within a rack, between GPU nodes or within actual post itself becomes super important. So at every layer of the stack, the network connectivity, it becomes super okay.
And so, how did the world move faster while you were away, or were you surprised when you came back? Was there a lot of catching up to do? What happened?
That's a great question, man. So I took a month off to Hoover. That nicely gives us 1 month off after every 5 years. So I hit my second one, so 10 years. And it's sort of like a weird time warp. So I noticed that it's almost like I didn't leave. And my teams, continued on without me with no problem. But there was a stack of problems also when I came back, and there was a lot had changed. But it felt like I had never left. So, you sort of get caught in this situation where you're like, you're catching up, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that happened. No, that's already closed, or that's already taken care of, or we already overcame this problem, or I thought was this huge deal for this as you stack of talk, right? So you get stuck in this kind of time warp, which is really interesting.
You've worked a lot on automating infrastructure. How is AI changing that game today?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. So we're still in the early days of that, I would say, across the industry and at Uber. So what we're looking at is ways that we can leverage AI not as a magical solution to everything, but where can we apply strengths that it has to synthesize information, summarize a lot of different disparate data sources, provide information to humans that is at a scale that humans wouldn't be able to comprehend, necessarily by themselves. So where this comes into play for us, it's a very interesting use case for us. Is really incident and outage mitigation. And so we have a lot of services at Uber, 4,000 plus microservices, the network infrastructure, which I deal in, very large. And when something goes wrong, you get a lot of signal from all over. It could be telemetry data from a network device. It could be service level indicator being breached. It could be service metrics. It could be logs. It could be all kinds of stuff, right? So an on-call engineer has to understand all of this information and synthesize it and then take an action to mitigate their impact to our infrastructure, because the Uber every minute of downtime is actually measured in hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a transaction to never get back because those people are going to take a ride somewhere else. So for us, anything we can do to provide our on-call engineers faster fault localization and knowledge of where something is broken, or a suggestion where they could dig in and take a mitigation action, I think is the first step for us. So we're working on tools around that now. And I think very quickly after that becomes, what actions does the on-call engineer take that could then also be off? And I think that's a little bit of a further lead, because we have to ensure, like with anything AI, that the data we're putting in is 100% accurate, 100% actionable for you before we entrust an AI agent to take an action that could either fix a potential incident or cause a potential incident. So those are the things we're sort of grappling with. And then so it's a really interesting area of investment. There's a lot of companies doing interesting things out there that we're trying to learn from, take bits and pieces, and again, adapt it to our needs.
Automation and efficiency is one thing then. What about jobs? is AI going to come after the choice?
Yeah, I'm a little bit less worried about that, I think, than most people. So I do see a big risk, and the risk I see is that uh, I think companies maybe overbuying into the thought that, okay, I'm going to replace all of my junior engineers with AI. I think we're early, right? Now, where I'm seeing this having potentially a bad impact is that message is already out there, right? In the media, there's been companies themselves have said it, some prominent tech people. And what that will do is that's going to freeze on younger people wanting to go into this industry. So already it's going to have an effect of less graduates and less graduates of your size, potentially. And on the flip side of that, from a company perspective, like we just had our biggest intern class ever, like here in Amsterdam. And we had a bunch of brilliant software engineering undergrads come and do amazing work, and we're going to try and hire as many of them as we can. So we're not slowing down on that. But I do see, 2-3 years from now, it could be an issue because of what's going on in the industry. We're going to choke that pipeline off no matter what of talent coming in. And then also the technology may improve enough where, in fact, you can replace junior engineers with AI completely. And then the question in my mind is about what happens 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when you don't have that pipeline of talent becoming your senior engineers, your readers. Unless we go to a fully autonomous world, then maybe they don't need any of us. Then it's going to be a problem.
Uber's both a tech company and a consumer brand. From the inside, how much do engineering choices really affect the marketing and customer experience?
So I think it's huge, right? So I think it has a huge potential to really impact the customer experience, either in a positive or a negative way, right? So many times the business is actually moving faster than the technology. So I'll give you an example. Autonomous vehicles is a great example, just industry wide, but also there's specific products that say that we could really do that could really turbocharge the business on the delivery front, etc. And it could be the business case is solved, right? But the technology behind it is complex or hard to implement. And so if we're lagging too far behind where the business space go, I think that's an issue. And we've done a good job keeping up with the business, but it's always a risk, right? And we have to be able to deliver the right technology solutions to meet the business needs. Now, on the other side of that, I think technology writ large, there's a tendency to, as technologists, to want to use the newest, greatest thing, and without necessarily thinking of what is the business, what is the ROI. So I always encourage everyone and with my engineers to think of like we're not doing technology for the sake of doing technology or be cool to us, right? We're doing it to fill and meet a business need and see that ROI. And so I think you need to have that mutual understanding between business and engineering to really stay aligned. This challenge is for sure a challenge. And I think if you can do that, the positive potential is huge. Now, on the downside, there's negative things of engineering can cost the business all day, all night, right? If we don't do our job, if we don't think about scale, we don't think about reliability, we don't handle our incidents properly, if we don't reduce our mean time to mitigation fanatically, then you are going to cost the business valuable aids when things are bad. So it goes both ways, but I think the really exciting part is understanding the cool business use cases that were there, and they'd be like, okay, what engineering do we need to do to meet that as quickly as possible?
Do you have any interesting story around when infrastructure directly shaped a marketing campaign?
Yeah, so I think so I have sort of a personal story, and I don't want to take credit for it because there were a lot of people were thinking about this, but I do remember in the early days of Uber, I had a colleague or a friend of mine who was a account executive at a networking vendor company, and they're having a big convention. They have a big convention every year, and this is 2015 or so. And he called me up and he's like, hey, I really want I want to give Uber credits to some of my clients. Like, how can we do that? Right? Can you make that happen? And on the engineering front, I'm like, I can't be a person from where I sat at that time. And then I looked into it, and I'm like, we don't have the way to boots. We don't have a system of providing credits to a third person, either as a voucher or gift card and so on. And so that idea, I just connected people, and then to the Uber people's credit with their time, they took it and ran with it. That turned into a different business. And again, they were already working on it, but it really catalyzed it because they were able to deliver both a business and an engineering solution in the week before that conference. And it turns out it resulted in a handful, 40 rides maybe taken, but it proved out the use case of like, hey, we can provide credits to a third party through this mechanism on the engineering side, and there is a business case for it, and then they took it at there. That was pretty.
You're also an angel investor. What grabs your attention in a startup phase?
Yeah, so I think for me, I mean, there's always and I learned a lot the hard way, I'll put it that way. So I started investing, I think, in 2020. I've had a few things that have worked out successfully, and a vast number more that have not. And so I've learned a lot of lessons. I think for me, it's more than the like sort of latest trend is really the founders, right? So like what I found really cool about it is just meeting founders, you're talking to founders, and you're hearing about like the interesting problems that they're trying to solve and the passion they have for that problem and how they're solving it. Now, that may not be a good thesis for how to make money. I'll still try to see if that works out. But to me, I learned a lot just from that part of it, which is understanding like some of these founders think of problems that are amazing, where you're like, wow, that is a huge market, that is a huge opportunity that I'm going to go after, and it's something I never thought of or I never really thought of. So just seeing how people look at the world in a different lens it has been usually rule.
And what's a red flag you keep seeing in founders?
I think now it's a lot of AI being thrown around when you look under the hood, and it's like not really AI, or you think about it and you're like, you don't really need AI to do this. So I think there's this, and for good reason, there's this tendency of founders to like to follow the herd, because that's the investors that follow the herd. Right? The investors are investing in anything AI. Founders know that, so they're trying to either retrofit what they're doing to have some AI in it, or kind of obfuscate what they are doing with AI and call it AI. So I've seen some of that, and that's a big red flag to me. It's like there's really good businesses to invest in that have nothing to do with AI. There always have been, and there always will be. Right. So if that's your business, be proud of it. Right. Own it. If anything, it makes you stand out the crowd now as opposed to everyone else's.
He will be there. So, as Uber's head of network infrastructure for EMEA, what's a day in your life actually look like?
It's usually starts with a little spike in my cortisol level. So I wake up in the morning and I look at my phone, and I usually have at least 5 or 10 missed Slack, not missed, I'm sleeping, the Slack messages from the US side. I'll have maybe a couple of automated alerts. I'll have some other messages. So it's probably not the best way to start the morning, but I usually, I grab my coffee, I dig through those, see what's sort of on the schedule for the day. Usually I try to spend as much time with engineers as possible. So there's a lot of meetings that go on, but I also try to just dig in with engineers one-on-one, understand what changes we're making, what code we're pushing that day, to kind of get in my head a little risk assessment of how the day is going to look. Usually it's totally smooth, but understanding what changes we're making to the system in that day. Then I look out like a little bit further, like, okay, what's coming due this week, next week? What are the strategic things I need to think about? So I sort of start at the smallest or most lowest level and kind of expand out as I go through my day. And then, it is a lot of meetings and stuff. So I think I usually try to save the last part of my day to kind of really go through emails and answer people, reconnect people.
And how much of your time is taken up by meetings?
I would say probably too much. I mean, that's probably like everybody. I think this is sort of an artifact of the COVID years and the pandemic, where it's like things before that would have been a quick message or an email or figuring something out asynchronously. I think there's a tendency for everyone to say, well, let's just meet, right? And put a Zoom on your calendar, because we're still in this weird post-pandemic world where we're back at the office, but not fully. So there's like a lot of people you're meeting with aren't there, or you're not there, so you're on Zoom anyway. So you saw that pandemic era read to like just jump on a Zoom with somebody. And the positive I've seen is like I see a much less 1 hour meetings. Like every meeting now, the default is 30 minutes, which I think is great. But yeah, there's a lot, and I think one of the ways that we try to encourage our teams to get out of this is really to work on their writing, right? I think technical writing, uh, the skill that must be developed, and it's very important. And it's also part of the culture. And so if you look at Amazon, Amazon has a very writing centric culture, right? Anything you got to write a technical doc, got to get feedback, and that whole mechanism is through the documentation, and that's how you influence speed. So that's what we've tried to recreate. Again, taking what parts work for us and what doesn't. But that can help reduce sort of the meeting load because it's like everything you want to know that you were going to ask me is in this doc. You have questions, has to be there. I'll answer them because other people may have it. But I think you've reduced some of this need to just meet. That being said, we're humans. We need to meet, and I love to meet my team and meet in person. But I would much rather be heads down, like with a bunch of engineers or a couple of engineers, than in a big meeting talking about status. The other mechanism was the one. So down.
Uber's in so many countries with totally different infrastructure challenges. How do you adjust your strategy across all those markets?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think early on in the early Uber years, we were very focused on our infrastructure in the U.S. Right. So for example, if you were using the Uber application in India, which is one of our biggest potential markets, the latency was it would take 2-3 minutes for the app to load. And the reason is that number of traffic was actually when he set up there, California, like from India. So it took us some time to we knew we need to build infrastructure much closer to the customer. So through cloud provider partnerships, we deployed our edge all over the world to have a better experience for customers. Now there's deliveries another law, right? Deliveries sort of there's a global platform, but it's also very local, right? Like delivery modalities, how people deliver stuff. It could be a two-wheeler in certain countries. It could be a bicycle. Could be I've seen people deliver like walking with a backpack in some very dense urban areas. So like the modalities are totally different. So the engineering solutions have to be flexible enough to scale well, but also customizable enough for the market leaders in those countries to be able to do and pick and choose what works for them.
Are there any other stories around the regional challenge where you had to come up with a very elite fix?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest example of that is China. So Uber, our CEO at the time, Travis, rightly so, China is a huge market. We had a fierce competitor there, Didi, that was also trying to elsewhere in the world. So I think it's sort of a little bit of a judo move. It's like, we're going to go compete with them on their home turf. So we launched in China, and we had 6 months to do it, right? And nobody at Uber had any experience building data centers in China and network, procurement, let alone like building a services and so on, and customizing it for the Chinese market and all those things, right? So that was a whole company effort that was, again, done in about 6 months, which is pretty crazy. And it was like really impressive thing to see happen. And, our teams played a part in it in terms of building out data centers, building out networks, but it was hugely challenging. Everything from the standard size server racks that we use, we shipped them all there, and then we realized the data center elevators aren't big enough to carry our racks. So coming up with creative solutions, I think they ended up taking out some of the windows on the data center and using a crane, or putting the racks in on second floor through the windows, which is something I did that we have. I hope it's very interesting to see. But you adapt and overcome, and I think that experience brought the whole engineering organization much closer together. It sort of showed us like this engineering org could do anything.
Uber has to be always on, but innovation moves fast. How do you balance pushing new stuff with keeping the lights on?
Yeah, so that is a great question, right? And so I think you have to look at first of all, I go back to the business case, right? The ROI. So if we have some new features, something we have to push that's going to enable, millions of dollars for the business, then that has to be a focus post. But at the same time, we're paying the bills every single day, and our infrastructure today is paying those bills. So example of that for us, I think, is the migration from our on-prem data centers to the cloud. So this is an ongoing process. We're in a hybrid cloud environment. We have our own infrastructure. We use 3 different cloud providers, and the question becomes like, we have to, like, the Uber owned infrastructure that we have is still taking care of a big percentage of the rides and deliveries that's happening today, but at the same time we have to shift this to the cloud, and we have to keep everything running at the same time, right? So we can't ignore the infrastructure that we have today or that we built, because it is paying the bills and it's enabling us for the future, right? So that balancing act is difficult. I think from an engineering perspective, you also have to focus on reliability, modernization, quality of your platforms that you're running. And I think the incentive system really matters, right? You have to incentivize your engineering leaders, your engineers, to take smart risks, but also to care about the keep the lights on work, because that is paying the bill. That's paying all the risk. So it's a challenge. I mean, it's always a balancing act. You're kind of always on this spectrum of like speed and quality. You're always going back and forth, right? So we're trying to find that balance of like, how do we push into the future while maintaining the present? And I think it's something we've been able to do pretty successfully, but it is always the challenge.
Nay. Was there ever a time innovation pushed too fast and created risks?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think good example, a well publicized example of this was our early push as a company into autonomous vehicles. So autonomous vehicles 2016, the technology was much less mature than it is today, with companies like Waymo and others pushing ahead with a very high focus on quality and safety in those days, which we also focused on. Their technology wasn't quite ready, I think. And so you're pushing, almost science fiction, right? Well, at that time, self-driving cars that drive around our cities, and pushing very, very hard. And I think the technology wasn't quite where it needed to be at that time to do that. And the company paid the price, right, in publicity and everything else. And, we ended up selling that business, and now we're back into that business, but through a partnership model, because in the intervening, 9-10 years, these other companies have continued to incrementally make it better and better and better every year. Whereas today, now it's 25% of the rides in San Francisco are taken by autonomous vehicles on Waymo's network, right? So I think the technology has caught up to the ambition, 8-9 years after.
You've called yourself curious, someone who likes to break and fix things. How has that mindset helped you over your career?
Yeah, so I think the best way to learn, and I think the way it's helped me, is to be curious and to break and to try things out. Now, I think I'm much more careful of it as I grow in my career and the older I get. But I think, it's like if you buy something new at the store, some new electric gizmo, I never read the instruction manual, right? I just start messing with it, trying to figure out how it works, how it doesn't work, and that's how I sort of approach everything. Is like, I don't want guidelines or instruction. Look, I want to just dive in and see what I can make myself. Now, that's not always the best idea. That's, sometimes it is. You also learn from doing the other way, but I try to balance it now as I move.
And how do you pass this curiosity onto your team?
Yeah, so I think that's key. So I think part of it is, as humans, I think we are naturally curious people, and I think where that gets stifled is companies, is that we don't provide the opportunities for that to come out, right? So for the engineers, especially my junior engineers, I really want to challenge that, right? So like, I don't want to give them stuff that I know they can do them and that's safe, right? I want them to stretch and be a little like scared, right? Like, hey, I want them to think this is way bigger than I think I can do, or way harder than I think I can accomplish. And what that does is it forces them to really stretch ahead, and it has to be a safe space for them to do that. They have to have the support. You have to know that, like, okay, I'm going to try and figure this out. If I can't, then there is help around me. But I think if you do that, if you challenge them, their natural curiosity is going to take over. They really dive in. At least the engineers that I want to have on my team, the engineers I try to hire. Now, that's not for everybody, right? That may scare certain people away from where they want more certainty and they want more structure. We really try to encourage people to, like, where the business need meets like your curiosity, or like, and abilities. Like, let's stretch it. We'll see in the cut.
All right, so the last question for you is of a personal kind. What would you be doing in your life if not this?
That's a good question. I think owning a restaurant would be my answer. And the restaurant's atmosphere, interplay between sort of host and customer and chef and customer, and really the act of feeding somebody is like an act of like human love towards another. I mean, that's something better than that to be almost that you could do, or if you're doing it right, you bring people sort of pure joy. And I can't really think of what else I'm doing that we do where you do it right day in and day out. If it works out and it's successful. So I don't know anything about the restaurant industry, but I was going to do something else. Hi, I'm Vishnu Acharya, the head of network infrastructure at Uber. Catch me on the Marketer of the Month show.